much. Thanks, Kate. Everyone, you're very welcome to this session. This is Experts Work webinar, which is for members of all three of our networks, as you know. And today we're exploring Wellbeing Starts With You, maximising your influence as an HR professional. And the beauty of this is there's going to be a little bit of time. You've got an hour in your day that's about you, as opposed to you trying to help everybody else. And Lucile, lovely to have you along. Lucile Kamar is an award-winning DEI expert, career and mindset coach, and former head of DEI at ITN. Thank you ever so much for doing this. As you heard, we're recording the session for the members' YouTube channel, and we'll send out the link afterwards. There's no breakout rooms for this one, I don't think, but lots of interactivity and useful exercises with some time at the end for Q&A and the half finish at 12 o'clock. So, Lucile, without further ado, lovely to see everyone. Thank you for coming, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you everyone for tuning in. I know how precious the time that we have during the week is, and actually I just really wanted for everyone to start by acknowledging and, dare I say, congratulate ourselves for taking the time to reinvest in our own well-being. And when I was thinking about this session, and when Richard and I were talking about this session, we really thought, how can it be informative, but also provide the space for everyone to talk about their experience? And I think there's beauty in communities such as this one, is really understanding and realizing that we're not on our own and there is support available. We didn't plan for today to for today's webinar to be on International Mental Health Day, which I thought was quite fitting, and talking about the importance of how are we supposed to give back to others if we don't give back to ourselves. So I don't have slides. I have a couple of images and things to share with you, but I thought it would be much better for us to have a discussion and blending both the discussion and the exercises. So as Richard mentioned, I've been working in the DEI space in a variety of organizations for over 10 years now. My background is in human rights law, and I had run my career on autopilot, really going through the milestones, taking the 2-year plan, 3-year plan, 5-year plan, without really realizing how fulfilled was I, and also what was the state of my mental health. And it reached a point where in the summer of last year, I was diagnosed with mixed anxiety and depression as the result of a situation at work, which really led me to think about how much was I giving to work, what was my responsibility in looking after myself, what could I have done better, but also what was the responsibility of my employer as well. And I feel like for leaders in the people space, we're often caught between a rock and a hard place. And I've made it my mission now to educate people, and really in everything that I do, prevent as much as I can, give the tools so that people don't get to that stage of crisis where I was, and having to build up from scratch. So really that's the background of today. And I know as HR professionals, people professionals, we're dedicating to creating those supportive workplaces, but at what cost? So that's really the purpose of today, is remembering that it's a safe and non-judgmental space. There might be things that I say that resonate with you, some that don't, but trust yourself, you know best. And in terms of what we'll cover, I was really keen to look at the well-being and influence connection, or the well-being and impact connection. So well-being sometimes is seen as a nice to have, something that we mark once a year for Mental Health Day. But actually, I really wanted to deep dive and showcase why well-being and mental health matters when we talk about innovation, creativity, being productive. It's not going to be a session about, well, you should take 5 minutes to not have lunch at your desk or take a walk in the park. I really wanted to deep dive into the different elements of mental health and well-beings, and for you to really identify where you're scoring high in one element and what you might not, and then how that can help you with creating your own personal toolkit that you can rely on. So before we we do that, I wanted to start by a breathing exercise, just as a reset, making sure that we're all arriving, we're all present. So if you can, if it's safe for you, if you're not driving, if you're in open plan, you don't have to close your eyes. But if you can, please close your eyes and make sure that you sit nicely, that your back is supported, that your feet are flat on the floor. And we're going to do an exercise called box breathing. It's very simple and straightforward. It's 4 count on an inhale, 4 count of a hold, 4 count on an exhale, and 4 counts as a hold. And we're going to do a couple of rounds for that. And yeah, we're going to start now by inhaling on the count of 4, 2, 3, 4, and hold. 2, 3, 4, exhale. 2, 3, 4, hold. Inhale, hold. Exhale and hold. Inhale, hold. Exhale, hold. Last round, inhale, hold. Exhale and hold. And now you can come back to the room, the virtual room, and hopefully you're feeling a bit more grounded. Something that's really beautiful with the breath is that it can really help you switch from the parasympathetic system to the sympathetic system. So if you're in a state of stress, how can you actively use the breath to get yourself into that rest and digest system that's more calm and more settled. So before we start, and as I mentioned, this is going to be really interactive. So I welcome any comments, any interactions, any shares in the chat or in person. And just to make sure that I cover the right element, I'd love for you to tell me what would be helpful, what would be the most helpful for this session for you to either discuss or talk about or learn. What's the best use of the next 45 minutes? I know, Kate, you mentioned a couple of elements which I've got in not the presentation, but the notes that I have. So I've got that covered. Yeah, examples of where it has worked well. Thanks, Pippa. Yeah. Negative self-talk, which can be quite powerful. I was having that discussion a couple of days ago. Over the past year or since January, I've taken some time to set up my company. I do D&I consultancy, and I've also done a coaching qualification. And how to tackle negative self-talk is really something that I discussed with a client of mine, where she was receiving such positive feedback, such external validation, but actually her negative self-talk and her limiting beliefs were so strong that it almost counterbalanced the impact that she had. The connection between well-being and influence, yeah. Yeah, Julia, when you're firefighting, for example, or everything seems to be urgent. Tools we can share with our teams, yeah, we've got that. How not to lose focus. Yes, Emma, I've got in the personal action plans, I've broken it down into, what you can do on a daily basis, weekly basis, monthly basis, and also what you can do that takes 1 minute, like the breathing exercise that we've done, what you can do if you've got half an hour, 10 minutes, 15 minutes.
Great.
Yeah. How to manage being overwhelmed. Yeah. And I think that goes back with how do we regain that sense of control when there's so much uncertainty in our external environment, but also in our internal environments as well. Yeah, Julia, very good point. And that's often, how do we make the case that it is something that has an impact not only on the people element, but ultimately how can it be a commercial priority as well, in the same way that being focused, any other elements. So we're yeah, the link between creativity and innovation, we'll cover that as well. So yeah, as we know, there is so much uncertainty. There has been more uncertainty in the past 4 years than I think in the past 10 years, be it from COVID, hybrid working, now AI. We don't really know how it's going to impact what we do. We're seeing a lot of AI in recruitment and in people processes, but we're not quite sure of the long-term impact and the short-term impact as well. There's external elements like the cost of living crisis, the political uncertainty, and also within the HR market, we've seen it fluctuating. Some of you might be looking for new roles or might be looking at your next steps, and how the market has been quite quite different from what it has been in the past. Roles that are far and few, pay that might not match the experience, and breadth of roles that keep being expanding. And that's something that does impact well-being. Our brains are wired to look for patterns and certainties and familiarity. So where there is so much uncertainty, it's being construed as a threat. So we're going to look at that. And I wanted to share with you the stress curve. I don't know if that's something that you're familiar with. I'll see if I can share my screen so that you can see what it looks like. But that's the stress curve. Basically, there is an element, there is an optimum level of stress that we can all have. We know about the burnout stage, but there's also the bore-out stage where we don't have enough to do, we're not stimulated enough, and how that can impact our mental health as well. The problem is now we haven't really had a chance, I would say, since 2020 to go back to that optimum state of stress, where we're challenged but we feel fulfilled by the challenge. Our stress has been consistently pretty much dialed up without really giving us the space to reset. With roles such as like ours in the people team, the pressures are coming from both the leadership team, but also our team members and their team members. The pressures, the challenges that we hear is, HR told us that we couldn't do that, and always having that responsibility when actually decisions or implementation should be made by leaders or people managers, for example. So that's where that element here, when there is too much exhaustion and burnout, that's where we are in distress, and that's where mental health and well-being starts being affected. And how does that impact mental health? Well, there is the element of the mental health spectrum from thriving, surviving, struggling, and in crisis. And I really like this. I think it's quite, it gives, I don't know if you're familiar with that, but I found when working in organization and using that, speaking to leaders, giving everyone a common language. So how do you start talking about mental health is making sure that you have a model or a formula or common language where everyone can relate to some pointers and being able to do that. So as we all know, mental health is a spectrum, and there might be stages where we go from healthy to coping, specifically when there are a lot of priorities, big projects to get over the line. But I found specifically, I can share that with you, that this is really, really helpful to be able to start having the discussions as to where are we now, where's our team, and is there a discrepancy between where our team is and where we are.
Lucile, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
People was just asking, could we share the images afterwards?
Yes.
Oh, thank you very much. That's kind.
Yeah, absolutely. And another, again, when we talk about well-being, another aspect that we might want to talk about and giving that language is the well-being wheel. Again, something that we can share afterwards that you might be familiar as well. It's all of the elements that make well-being, that make a healthy well-being. And that's the first exercise that I would like for you to do, and something that you can do with your teams as well, is looking at each element of emotional wellness and giving yourself a score from 1 to 10 for each element. So yeah, emotional wellness is really around how your ability to cope and your feelings and your emotions. The wheels of healing is also really interesting. I feel like there's a lot of wheels available out there. So yeah, if you can take a couple of minutes just to give ourselves a score from 1 to 10 for each of the elements, and if any of the little aspects don't make sense, please let me know and I can go into a bit more detail around that. For this exercise, I'm not going to ask you to share anything. It's really for you to get a bit of a baseline. And what I would encourage you to do is go back in 3 months. That might be the end of the year, and we know how busy the end of the year is, but a really good way to go back and check on a 3-month basis, on a monthly basis, how your scores have changed, and also what you can do. You might score really highly in financial wellness, but very, very low in physical wellness, for example. And I found that really helpful, very helpful, not to get yourself overwhelmed as to where to start. Really looking at what can have the higher return on value. And yes, I'll be sharing copies of the all of the images as well. So,
Lucile,
yeah.
sorry, I had a question on the wheel.
Yeah.
Just reflecting on it, is it fair to say that some of those matter more to some people than others? Or, if we were looking at one and thinking that doesn't feel like that's significant for me. So I would say I'd take spiritual, for example. So I am a person of faith, but I've got lots of friends who are not, and it's just not an aspect of their lives. And when I'm at work and I'm doing sort of well-being stuff, that's often an area that's interesting to explore. But for some people, it's just not. They would say it's not relevant to them. So do you think that's so that's just one example, but you could be like physical. Some people are not into keeping fit. Is there space for an encouragement for ourselves? We're talking about people on this call. Should we be just exploring that a bit more, or what's your I don't know, what I suppose my question is it legitimate to just say that's not relevant for me, or should we have a bit more self-reflection about that, whichever one it is, environmental or physical, whatever?
Yeah, thanks, Kate. And that's a really great question. And obviously, this is an overall wheel of wellness. If you were looking at it in a work context, for example, it might be worth thinking whether spirituality or faith has a place within a work context, and how much is it the responsibility for an employer to talk about or open up the discussions around faith or spirituality in a work context. So if you were looking at it within a work context, you'd probably focus on financial wellness, social wellness, environment, physical. You'd probably want to reduce it to some of the core elements. And I liked your reflection on, do we need to practice more self-reflection and challenge ourselves? But I also think that you would know the answer straight away. And I would say really trust that if it doesn't resonate with you, then it doesn't have to resonate. And it might be that when you come back to the wheel in 3 months' time, 6 months' time, a year's time, it might become more important. Thinking about some of the life changes that we can go through. Some of them might go through grief, some might become parents, some might go through menopause or health challenges, in which case some elements of the will might become more important, more prevalent, depending on the life changes that we might go through.
Yeah, thanks.
Lucile, just to kind of sort of dip in, Kate's made me think of something off the back of your question, Kate, really. Lucile, what are you saying, that it often works best, this wheel, with quite an instinctive response, if you see what I mean? It's quite in your experience in terms of how you use it, it's usually you'll know fairly quickly which of the pieces of the pie are most relevant. Is that what you were saying?
Yeah, I think specifically when it's the first time that you're using the ranking of 1 to 10 is quite helpful to be able to say not only how important it is for me, but also how important is it for me and how well do I think am I fulfilled within that element? And Nancy, yeah, around purpose and values, absolutely, there's definitely an element of that as well.
Great, thanks. I'm just thinking for people using it with their teams, as Kate was saying, I think really, it's no bad thing if you think, well, actually, that's not relevant for me right at this point in my life. But as you were saying, you'll feel like maybe in 6 months it would be when you come to, or 3 months.
Yeah, and with organizations and with teams, thinking about the maturity level of the understanding, and if you've never had those sorts of conversation, it might be easier to start with physical wellness, where everyone might have a concept, and then build up on that, as opposed to overwhelm everyone in one go with concept that they might not be comfortable or have the maturity of, have never encountered before. So yeah, that would be my recommendations. And moving on to the link between how do we make the business case for mental health and well-being and within an organizational context. And that goes back to, as I mentioned, a bit of neuroscience on that and how the brain works. And the brain is wired for connection. It's wired for safety. It's wired for what's the familiar. So we're so primed to really spot any signs of exclusion, and it might be micro signs of exclusion. So actually, when we're at work, there is so much uncertainty, there is so much in groups and out groups, that our brain understands threats, social threats, in the same way that it would understand a physical threat. So when you experience a physical threat, your amygdala is triggered within your limbic system. So you've got that fight or flight response, or freeze or fawn. And when that is triggered, you've got spikes of hormones, the cortisol, the stress hormone. And when this happens, it overwhelms your prefrontal cortex, which is the center of your decision making, where you've got the ability to think and critically analyze complex informations. So actually creating an environment of psychological safety, creating an environment belonging, creating an environment of safety where people feel emotionally, mentally safe makes sense. Because if you don't have access, if your cognitive resources are completely overwhelmed by being in that state of fight or flight or freeze or fawn response, then you don't have as much capacity to rely on that prefrontal cortex and focus on that innovation, that creativity, that problem solving. And that's, obviously a lot more complex. But basically, one of the key principles of the brain, the default of the brain, is avoiding threat, avoiding pain. So threat is a higher motivator than reward. And ambiguity, the brain hates ambiguity, and it's seen as a threat for some people. So, when the threat level increases, your cognitive control decreases. So it really lowers your cognitive capacity, and therefore you rely more on biases, and with all of the problems that causes. And why it becomes relevant for us as leaders, for you as HR leaders, people leaders, so you can't really help anyone if you're experiencing an overwhelming sense of threats, or if the elements of your mental, physical, emotional, organizational well-being unmet. You have to look after yourself first. And obviously there are different ways to respond to uncertainty or change. But really thinking about how can you really look after yourself first, and making sure that you'll lessen the level of threat as much as possible in order to have, the most control over your cognitive and your more access to your cognitive abilities. So, as a leader, you've been told, it's your duty to take care of others and to create an environment where others can be well. And actually that's where then links come. And I often think about the 5 elements of EQ is knowing your emotions, managing your emotions, then recognizing and knowing other people's emotions, managing the emotions of others, and then motivate. And thinking about the recognition and the regulation. Recognition is what I see, it's the self-awareness. And with others, it's the social awareness. So empathy, for example. And with the regulation, it's what I do. So for yourself, it will be self-management. What do I do with my emotions, my feelings? And with others, it's the relationship management. Something that I've seen mostly when I was in-house is a lot more pressure is being put on team leaders and people managers to look after people's well-being and mental health, and actually they might not have the tools, and they want to be there for their teams, but they might not have the tools to regulate and understand, or have the language to think about mental health and well-being for themselves, let alone in others. And that's when having boundaries comes in, and also being comfortable enough to signpost. So before we go into the common challenges and also boundaries, any questions